Thank you very much. You have answered my second question to a large extent already, which was from all the experience you have over all these years. I mean, you were founders or members of the founding generation of the international independent living movement. And so you have a great overview over the historic process in the United States. And you have been, I mean, godfathers and godmothers of several of the independent living centers in Europe through your work of teaching peer counseling and giving us a view of the history of the independent living movement in the United States. So my question would have been, what are your conclusions about the different situations in the United States and in Switzerland? I give an example of which you possibly might enlarge a little bit more. In the United States, the social security system seems not to be very, let's say, very luxurious, to say the least, or to be rather weak compared to what we have in Europe, and especially in Germany, in Switzerland, and Austria.
Right.
On the other hand, the possibilities of freedom, or the idea of freedom of choice, the idea of supporting the person to help himself rather than putting him away somewhere and to take total care of him, seems to be stronger in the United States than in Switzerland. And so you have different political environments,
right,
actually, for the different ideas of the independent living movement. And I thought to ask you, and I said you mostly answered that already, what do you see as a comparison? As a final question, then I would like to ask you, is there a message that you would like to give to the people of Europe and Switzerland out of your very long experience you have?
Okay,
we have, perhaps may I add, we have several, you mentioned the sixth revision of the invalid insurance, for instance, which is very threatening to a lot of people, which is a reduction of social security for many, many people, and causes lots of fears. We have other discussions which seem to be reductions or are reductions. And many people are afraid that we are going backwards, that the rights of the disabled people are not going forward, but backwards.
Do you want to say more also
I
about
have
that?
sorry. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, did you also want to say more about the situation in America versus in Europe? It's up to you.
Well, I'd like to start with a more general point and then move toward what both of you are asking, especially Peter, but both of you. I think a really important difference, and I think maybe this is a little bit cultural between the two countries, but nevertheless, we started out in America 40, 50 years ago in a situation very similar to what we've seen in Europe, where our country wasn't barrier-free, where there were a lot of special programs and special facilities for disabled people. But one thing that is different in our culture, and one thing that I would encourage people in Europe to do, and I think this is happening more and more in Europe, is to think about and focus on the capabilities the people have, what they can do, rather than so much what they need to be protected from. Because people without disabilities who focus on what people need to be protected from don't really know what people with disabilities need to be protected from. People with disabilities know that from their own life experience. And so when we have taught peer counseling, we've asked people with disabilities to share what has been your experience, what in your life experience has helped you to succeed at what you can do. And this helps build the sense of capability that people with disabilities really have. And if people without disabilities now say, this person is in a wheelchair, or they're blind, or they are hard of hearing or deaf, or perhaps they have an intellectual disability, then I wonder what they can do. Why don't I find out what they can do? Why don't I let them demonstrate to me what they can do and not assume I have to take over and direct the entire path of their life because they need to be protected so much. When I was a child in the United States, we had segregated education for disabled children. We were not allowed to go to school with other children. We were bused far away to other schools. And the idea was similar to this old idea that's not as strong in Europe now as it was 20 years ago when we first came, that, oh, well, these children need to be protected, they will be unsafe in schools for other children. In fact, what we found was we had less opportunity because the education was not as good, it was not as challenging. We did not have the opportunity to participate in a lot of other activities that other children ordinarily have the ability to join in and participate in. And so we were behind in our ability to be able to be successful later on, either at university or something like Fachhochschule or at work. We did not have the skills because we were so protected that we did not have the opportunity to try and to develop our own capabilities. And when we found the opportunities to get out into the mainstream, this happened by the 1970s, our education was integrated. Then we found we could develop a lot of skills and power. And there is really no reason why people in Europe cannot also experience that. And in Europe, I think every country is different in the way they go about that. But what is really different, I think, in the German-speaking countries in particular, is this culture of building large institutions. We have some in America, but not so many. And in Germany, we notice, for example, that they build an institution for everything and everybody. Each little separate population with separate issues, they have an institution. And so you go live there or you spend a lot of your time there. And as a result, people out in the street, the ordinary general public, does not interact with people who are in any way different. Older people or disabled people or immigrants or whoever you want to call, each group is set aside a special place. And then everybody remains ignorant of the issues and capabilities of all the other groups. And in the United States, this really has broken down in that we all are pretty integrated. Unless you come from some little town somewhere way out in the countryside, you're used to being around people who are all different backgrounds, different abilities, and the same with disability. So you will see, if it happens in any country, and we have seen that, for instance, here in Switzerland, in Bern, they have accessible buses, and we have seen that there are a lot more people with disabilities out in the center of town, you know, sightseeing or shopping or going to whatever meetings they have or school. And it's encouraging to us because this is more like what we have in the States, that everybody goes around and does what they are supposed to do and participates. And we would like to encourage all people in Europe to further this option and feel their own ability and power. And I do think in the last, well, let's see, our first trip here was in '91. So in the last 19 years, there have been a lot of very good changes. And we want to encourage movement in that direction. In terms of Social Security, I think it's bad everywhere. I think in America, our Social Security system is being questioned politically, which is basically very wrong. It's one of the few systems in our country that really promotes equality for people in an economic sense. Our society in America has drastic economic inequality, more than anywhere we've seen in Northern Europe or in German-speaking countries, to the point that it's really very unfair and unjust. And if you are looking at your social insurance here in Switzerland or Germany or Austria, don't cut it the way we're cutting ours. It's a recipe for disaster. I mean, really disaster. if you really want to have people begging in the streets, which we have, okay, if you really want to have people who are older, who are so old that they are not able to work anymore without any money to eat and live, then cut it apart. But do you really want to have a society like that? I think if we really ask ourselves honestly, nobody wants a society like that. And there are always other ways to save money, okay? But not by taking away the support for meeting people's basic needs. That's not where you want to cut the money. And in America, it has just become a political football. That's the expression we use, where one party kicks the issue across the field and then the other party kicks it back. And they just have a lot of speeches about it and they make laws, but they don't really think, how's this really going to affect the people and how's this really going to affect the society? So I think it's important for people in Europe, before they take these drastic steps about cutting, to really think, well, what is this going to mean for people in our country? This is not going to be good for people in our country. Whether these people in our country are disabled or not, it's not a good thing for anybody. I feel pretty strongly about that. So we have been able to bring some of the good ideas from the States that we can share with you, but we don't want you to take our bad ideas as well, you know.
Bill, would you like to add something to that?
I think you said that eloquently. I just second what Vicky says, that don't dismantle what you have, try to strengthen it. I mean, it's sad to me because the German-speaking countries in Europe, and basically a lot of the Northern European countries, have much more social benefits, much more opportunities, for example, for personal assistance. I mean, Germany, for example, or Sweden, than we have in America. And to hear that there are cuts that are being discussed in those countries is very discouraging for us, because we are trying to get more hours of personal assistance and more basic social benefits, and we keep telling people, look to the European enlightened people for that. And if you move in our direction, we won't be able to say that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for this message. We agree totally. And we hope you have a very successful and very pleasant stay for the rest in Europe.
Thank you.
And to see you again. Thank you very much for
Thanks.
coming here.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.